Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Steve, and today I'm joined by Guy Sklanders from How to Be a Great Game Master, one of my favorite people on the internet, actually. How are you doing today?
I am really good, thank you, sir. And how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome, much better for having you on today. And sometimes doing these is like getting to learn about new things and experience new people and expose my audience to other people maybe they haven't encountered before. But today it's like just bringing on an old friend and hanging out. So
absolute joy to be here as well. So yeah,
it's
let's
been
hang.
Yeah, it's been I've had a whole reunion with some of the Saber Dice crew. Over the weekend I had dinner with one of the fine folks from that game, and now I got you on here. And actually, I saw that you had a Kickstarter going on. I'm like, hey, we should bring Guy on, and we should talk about that Kickstarter. But before we talk about the Kickstarter, as always, folks, links are in the description. Why don't you tell people who you are and kind of what you do in case someone is not aware? But I doubt it.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Guy, and I run a YouTube channel called How to Be a Great GM, which ostensibly tries to show you how to run the game from the story perspective. I don't do rules and builds, and I leave all of that really intelligent stuff to people like Dave and company, because I build awful characters, as I'm sure Dave remembers. I build bad characters. Anyway, so I do that. We talk about how to create NPCs, not from a stat perspective, but from another perspective, so that they will tell you how to run their games and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's kind of what I do, really, and have been doing for quite a long time. Not as long as you guys have been going at it, but for quite a long time.
Yeah, I think it's been, pretty close. I think we started our channels closer to around the same time. We started back in 2014.
Yeah, so well, no, then if you were 2014, we were 15, somewhere there. So not that far, actually. Yeah.
Pretty
it's been
close.
A while.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Well, did you start with Bacon Brigade?
Well, that was our first live play. Yes. Yes. And that was way back when. That was a lot of fun. But also talk about our Save or Dice game. I was on a podcast the other day, and they said, what's one of your favorite role-playing stories of all time? And mine is the 40 tons of beans being dropped on Jinx and all of you guys when you were fighting the big bad on his white dragon. What was the character, the Dragonborn, that Michael was playing? He was in charge of the Skywell.
I remember the voice, and that he had a familiar. Oh, Draxus. Yes. Wasn't it Draxus?
Draxus, that's right. Yes. Yeah, with his gravelly voice, and he was always very angry with everybody. Those were.
It's funny because we were talking about this over the weekend when I was hanging out with other said member, and for a while they had a PO box, and they would just get. They had to shut it down really quick because they're just getting weird stuff. But so many different beans came through the mail.
Oh boy!
Or the post. You guys call it the post, right?
Yeah. Oh, crazy.
Yeah, good times were had by all. For sure. So this isn't your first DM book, right? This is another DM style advice book.
Correct. Although in a way, it's also a reworking of that first book as well because of the stretch goals that we hit. So the first book was the complete guide to creating epic campaigns, which when I wrote it at the time, I personally felt that was the only type of campaign that you should ever play. Is these massive epic campaigns that are world shattering and that are, if you don't solve it, the whole cosmos will collapse.
I'm just going to tell you guys, it sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Because I those games in my experience never find the end.
Right. Well, that's what the book was about, this is how you do it so that you actually finish and that everything works out and all that kind of stuff. And so many people. I mean, that book has been our bestseller book since it came out in like 2018. Then we've been working on other books and we've done some other stuff. And then this year it was like, no, I want to release this new book because I had a complete shift in how I approach DMing from the ground up. It was like, nope, we have been doing it wrong, or at least I have been doing it wrong the whole time. I need to change completely. And so change things on their heads, and they seem to work a lot better in the new way. And so we said, okay, well, let's do a new book. And so that's what the current Kickstarter is.
What was the epiphany?
The epiphany was changing, and this is in a nutshell, really the difference, is changing the word plot to plan. And that's really the big difference. And you kind of go, okay, that's not major. But when you look at how we tell stories, we generally talk about a plot. And you go, well, a plot has a defined beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what we use as a benchmark to decide if we've had a good game or not. So if you're running a D&D game, whether it's conscious or unconscious, you will have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And as you were saying earlier on, oftentimes the end doesn't happen, especially if it's a campaign, right? So I've always been talking about how to run your games in terms of a plot. So you work out the ending of your plot first, so you kind of know how the plot ends, and then you kind of work backwards to work out how the story would work to get to that end point. But what that does is that presupposes the choices of the characters, of the players, as well as it locks the villains and the enemies into certain courses of action that they have to take. So when you look at Curse of Strahd, or you look at, you look at any pre-written module, the module writers have to have done that. They have to have worked out an ending that you should try to aim for. The problem is that works really well if you're writing a book, or you're writing a comic book, or you're writing a film. Where it falls over is when it becomes the blinkers on you as the GM of, oh my goodness, I need my party to find these 3 things before they face Strahd, because otherwise Strahd will kill them. Or I need them to do this before that, because otherwise, and they miss this opportunity. So how are they going to find the clue that links them? Because my big plot requires the PCs to have done this, and the PCs didn't. So if you shift your mindset away from a plot and you rather instead turn it into a plan, well, plans are not necessarily predetermined. So you go, well, I would like this to happen in the end. And so I've planned to do this to get there. But the important thing is the moment the PCs come into contact with that plan, they're going to change it. So, right, they're going to, well, this is the thing. We say they're going to break it.
Yeah.
That is if it's a plot, because a plot is a chain of events that you have anticipated will be happening. So they're breaking that chain. But if it's a plan, you go, okay, well, my plan was X, Y, and Z, and now they have completely skipped out Y. Well, how do I get from X now to Z, knowing that Y is no longer there? And it's not how do I, and this is the other big thing, is that it's no longer the GM's responsibility to come up with the plot or with the plan or with the adventure, as a matter of fact, because the GM is not there. It's the NPC who has to come up with the plan. So the evil queen, she is the one who's coming up with this plan. And so what happens is you're shifting your mindset away from you as the GM being responsible for thwarting the players and for trying to come up with clever plots and clever plans. That's no longer your focus. Your focus is saying, well, the evil queen planned to do X, Y, and Z. The PCs stopped Y. So what is she going to do about it? And she might give up, in which case, well, then the PCs have won. They have successfully solved that problem, and she's moved away. Most likely she won't just give up. She will try to do something else. So that's the the mind shift is don't plan stuff, react to what's happening. But the way you react is only through the NPCs in your world, because the planet itself doesn't care. So if you throw a flood at the party, the flood is not going to care if the party has built a dam wall or if they freeze over the front of the flood. If that is sufficient, that will stop the flood. So it has no kind of choice in the matter. You as the GM are then acting as, well, the flood is being frozen. I'm reacting to that by giving you the rules that need to happen for that, or working out the consequences of that. When it comes to NPCs, though, they should be responsible for figuring out what their next plan is. And to do that, I have a system which, again, I've come up with, which you imprint onto the NPC, which gives you their goals, their objectives, their occupation, and how much at stake everything is that they're trying to do. So how far will they go, and what resources do they have? So they're trying to figure out what to do now. The PCs have caused everything to fall over and to break in unquoted space. A lot of people are kind of gone, okay, that removes the burden of me as the GM trying to come up with plots and just going, well, I have an evil duke who has a plan. Let's see how it happens. So the only thing that you're responsible for is introducing those plans to the PCs. Because if you have a plan for a creature or a thing, and the PCs never come across that plan, you have got nothing. A bunch of imaginary people in your head have done some imaginary stuff in your head, and only you know about it. So that your only responsibility is to say to the PCs, hey, you're riding past a castle and you see someone on the roof holding a metal lightning rod. If the PCs stop, they stop, and then they will engage. And now the plan is in motion. And however the PCs interfere with that plan or advance that plan, that's up to the NPC to worry about, not you as the GM. If they continue riding past and they don't interact with the plan, that's when you go, okay, well, you saw the plan happening. The plan was to invent a new lightning golem using the power of lightning. That now has actually happened. So my whole adventure of you stopping the lightning golem from happening, I never planned it in the first place because that's not the goal anymore. Now the villain goes, well, my plan has succeeded. I have a lightning golem. Okay. Well, what is that villain now going to do with said lightning golem? They're going to go into town and destroy everything, including the tavern that the PCs happen to be in. Again, the PCs can just leave, in which case the Duke expands his kingdom, and that's kind of where, you know, that storyline goes. You don't have to worry about it. Anyway, so that's the short version, and you know how much I can talk, because I think I'm at like video 7 or 8 now, where I'm unpacking this whole thing, and then, you know, there's a giant book which details the whole thing.
Yeah, so like, I think it was the Carnies from Absolute Tabletop Terrors that articulated for me like what it was that I had been doing as a DM for a long time. And, you know, I feel like there's a lot of benefit to running games this way. And that is, you know, I'm there to present problems and, you know, things that happen to the party, to the players. I don't figure out solutions. I stopped doing that a long time ago. Half the time when I make riddles and puzzles, I don't even create a solution to them.
Excellent. Yes.
And I just wait for them to come up with something that is probably better than what I would have come up with anyway. And, you know, I just feel like it, you know, gives you freedom as the GM to not like pigeonhole yourself into these spots because you're like, oh, I made this thing, I must use it. It becomes this crutch. And also sometimes, you know, we have trouble letting go of things we spend time on. So
exactly,
if you don't spend time on it, then you don't have to worry about letting it go.
You couldn't have said it better. And I talk about world building, and I'm like, you can spend 10 years developing the language of those people and the coinage system and the trade routes and all of that kind of wonderful stuff. That is a skill and an art on its own. The challenge is when your PCs walk in and try and burn down that castle that you have built almost by hand.
Yeah.
and they just stab everyone in there, and they don't talk to the scullery maid who's actually having a love affair with the stable boy. When they do that, you are going to get upset because all of your energy is put into this. But if you haven't done that, then go with the flow. And if they don't come across the scullery maid, they never learn about the stable boy, and you haven't lost anything. So I completely agree. I mean, I was watching a video, Lindy Beige, I have the utmost respect for. I think he's amazing. I love his videos. I watch his videos. But he did one on a trap that he made for a role-playing group. His explanation of how to resolve, well, it wasn't a trap, it was like a puzzle riddle.
Wait, I didn't even know he did role-playing games and never made RPG content.
Yeah, someone sent me the link for the video. Just his explanation on how to solve the riddle was a 37-minute video. Right?
Yeah.
And he built this thing. It's a complex lock. That's all it is. It's a complex lock. Well, it seems complex until you see the riddle answer, obviously, and then you go, oh, okay, that's simple enough once you know how it works. Anyway, so he presented this to his play group, the physical box that he had made with hinges and levers and all kinds of stuff. And he's busy telling the story of how his players took 2.5 hours to try and figure out how to open this lock in real time. Then got frustrated, and one of the players said, I just warp the door. I use shape wood or whatever spell he had access to. And Lindy Beige says, okay, well, it's going to take you all of your spell slots. And they were so desperate, they said, fine, I will just burn through it all, because they'd gone from this is an interesting puzzle and this is fun and we are amazed at the woodworking carpentry skills of the GM and that they made a physical prop for us to play with. It went into the realm of we're frustrated, and it got to the point of we no longer care about the consequences and we will just destroy this thing however we can. And I went, that is where you go, that's too far. We're not. Yeah.
You pushed them to madness.
Yes, exactly. And yes, you can sit back and go, mwahaha, I outfoxed my players. And you go, yeah, you I don't think that was Lindy Beige's. I don't think that's the reason why he did that. I think he did it was because it's a genuinely amazing locking system where you can give people the key and they still won't open that door. You know, so from that perspective, it's genius. But I think yes, there's a time and a place for antagonizing your players versus the PCs. But anyway, yeah. So I didn't know that he role played either until I got the video, and he's like, "Oh, I was running a game at a convention." I was like, "That must be fascinating to play in." I think.
I think they all do secretly, right? Like Shad, he made his own game,
right?
And who's the other big one? Scal something or other.
Yes, and then is it CJ Lang who started doing D&D stuff and then moved more into the histories of and fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, see, I haven't been around to CJ's videos in a while, but I've seen, like, we're friends on Facebook, so I've seen like that he's changed and he's doing a lot of like historical Asian facts and stuff now, which is super cool. So I want to grab some questions here. Brian says, I'm joining a group of 9th level friends together for the first time. How do I get over introductions and into rolling as soon as possible? How do you know your friends are 9th level and not like 3rd or 20th? That's what I want to know.
Don't you silently score your friends as you kind of get to know them in real life? It's like,
I don't, but I think I'm going to start. Definitely a commoner.
Yeah. How do you get them to just start role playing? I would put them in a crisis. That would be me.
Well, I said rolling as soon as possible, but the same difference, right? Like make something happen.
Absolutely. Put them in the middle of it. I will never forget. I was introducing people to role playing and they wanted something full of action. So I started them in a siege that they were losing. and they had to get out of the castle. They had to escape the castle. So I kind of reversed their fortunes. And I have also done it where, and I run 2 groups during the week, and they started a year apart. First group started, then this other group started, and I gave them the exact same adventure, kind of intending to run them through the same campaign out of mild sort of intellectual curiosity. And the exact same plot hook ended up with them being on the opposite sides of the politics going on in the city. And so now I'm running one campaign with the 2 groups in it, and the one group is hunting the other group from the exact same start. And that start was as an invasion of the city. And one group helped it, and the other group was trying to stop it. So that would be my advice. Get them straight into something big and dramatic, or small.
I love starting with some kind of action sequence or something is about to happen. Like I hardly will even give players a chance to introduce their characters and what they look like anymore. Like I'd rather show than tell. And, I'd rather do things like figure out how we can like delve into that a little bit through the story, as opposed to being like, I'm playing a 3rd level fighter and he's a dwarf and he doesn't like elves and blah, blah, blah. And everyone's like going to sleep at the table because no one really cares, right? Like to a certain extent, yeah, but I think if you can kind of show it in the game, it's a bit more exciting and engaging for the players.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more.
I know a certain GM like ran a game for us and we started as God Dragons. That was kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was funny because other players are like trying to figure out how to role play through the encounter, and I'm like, you just made me a dragon. Someone's going to get fire breathed on them. I don't care what else is going on.
Yeah, that was a great. That was a terrifying start because it was the first time I was using a VTT.
Yeah. So you decided to make it super complicated.
Yeah. Let's just jump in the deep end with
set of characters, everybody, and
oh boy,
it was a lot of fun though. But yeah, anytime you can just get them moving, blow something up, set something on fire, have monsters attack. Have a storm going on, and and they're on a ship, and they have to, cargo is in danger of sliding off. Or give them a chance to show something about their character. Like I've even done like where like everyone started off in a different place, and I'm like, well, what is your character doing right now? Because I knew I was going to whisk them out of that place and away from that thing they were doing. And I would do things like, oh, you're walking by, a shop window. What do you see when you look at your reflection? And just
nice.
Some
that's cool.
I like to use environmental things like that: windows, puddles, mirrors, astronauts, face shield, whatever's available.
Yeah.
So
I do like that.
So what's going on the channel? What are you talking about these days?
Well, for the last few weeks, it has just been the new thinking behind the we call it OGAS, which is the NPC system, which is occupation, goal, attitude, and stake. So we've been talking primarily about that. The next few weeks coming up, I talk about one of my games that I've been running. That's the duel game. It's been interesting these past couple of weeks because it's like, well, do we just focus on this one thing or do we try and change it up and stuff? But something else that we've been doing is 1-minute videos. YouTube shorts.
Oh yeah, I did notice that you were doing some shorts.
Yeah. And it's kind of mind-blowing in a way because at first I was like, I can't even say hello in 60 seconds. How the hell am I supposed to do a video in 60 seconds? How do I do this?
Yeah.
And the first few you'll see, I just don't breathe. It's like I can just speak words, and at 60 seconds, it's like, okay, I'm done. Goodbye. But then I realized that's not the point. The point is if you can't inspire someone to do something in 60 seconds, what's the point? So that a lot of those videos are like, here's an idea. Send your players a letter from one of their parents. Tell them they have to return home immediately. There has been a tragedy. You don't have to figure out what that is yet. Listen to what the players will tell you. They've got a backstory, supposedly. They might even say, it says here in my backstory, my parents burned to death in a fire when I was then made an orphan. And you're like, that's great. The letter still says mom and dad. You know, you figure out how the hell they didn't actually burn in the fire. They're secret agents who snuck away and they needed the fire to whatever, So that's what we've been doing a lot of is just, here's some ideas. Another one was the PCs come across a barking cat and they need to understand why the cat barks. I don't give the solutions. I just give you some options to think about. So then people can incorporate them and take them and see where they go with them. So that's been interesting too.
Yeah, I looked at them when they first came out and I'm like, should I do this? And then TikTok was exploding all over the place. And I'm like, which is essentially, it seems like this is, YouTube's answer to TikTok is the shorts.
I think it is. I do think that, I stand to be corrected, but I feel like it is the answer to TikTok, but it has slightly higher production expectations. I think anyway.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, most YouTubers have gone to an effort to set themselves up with a cool background. There's been some investment. And I mean, you and I have both been on the journey where it's gone from old days where it wasn't even a light and you use whatever I used to use my cell phone microphone. That journey has happened, but a lot of YouTubers are kind of put in that effort. So when they do shorts, the effort is still there. So there's a bit more structure. I don't know. That's been my experience. I remember I went onto TikTok. I lost 4 hours of my life. Yeah. I watched videos of people doing things. I didn't even know what they were doing most of the time. It was just like, this is there and I'm just lost. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, I went over to TikTok going, is this a thing we should be doing? And then I experimented a little bit and I was like, I just feel old. But I do find it kind of refreshing because it does have I do actually like, and you can even see this is slowly changing. Even over there, the production values are already starting to go up and people are doing them better. But the RPG community over there is pretty vibrant and very diverse too. Not, unlike YouTube, which is pretty much the same.
Yeah. I was talking to some folk the other day saying, if you look at YouTube, there's the old guard. And by the old guard, I mean people who have been here for 5 years or more. And that's been pretty stable. I can't think of anyone who was in that same group that we were kind of in, I would say the last 5 or 6 years, who's stopped doing stuff, unless I'm greatly mistaken.
There's at least one person that's vanished.
Right. But that's not a huge change.
No, it's not a huge change.
There have been quite a lot of people that have stepped up. Some of them are very good. And that's again what I find fascinating. We have all of these channels talking about all of this stuff, whether you're doing it in 60 seconds or whether you're doing it in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever your duration. We're all still talking about the same game, and there's always, doesn't matter who you watch, there's always some slight twist. There's some new insight, and you go, I didn't think about that, or I didn't think about it in that way, or that is so wrong, I can't even begin to tell you how much wrong it is, but at least I know that it is wrong, and I can see that. And that's what blows my mind, is this is a hobby that we're doing, and yet we can talk about it so much. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's never ending, and so many new voices coming in, and the collabs that are happening, and exciting times. Sometimes it feels a little crowded compared to when we started.
Oh yeah.
But it's
Absolutely.
good to have different voices and in there. So Spike has a question. This one's a bit loaded. How does one resolve getting treated unfairly or more harshly by your GM because of one's being very proficient with the rules and character building? Sometimes there's just personality conflicts, I think.
Oh, yeah. I would say exactly the same. If you are focused on those good builds and you do know the rules and you're passionate about those rules, I always advocate that if you're a GM and you have someone who has that as a resource, that they lean on that resource and say, okay, cool. So you want to do this, that, and the next thing. Rules person, what would be the legal rule? What would be the official rule? But for me, the difference is after the fact, is then say, okay, that's what the rule book says, but this is what I'm saying. And everybody at the table accepting that, because the GM's word is ultimately law. So I always advocate, if you know the rules really well and the GM is making bad call after bad call after bad call, your responsibility as part of the social contract is to accept those calls, not to stop the game and fight those calls, but to accept it and move on. And at the end of the session, then go to the GM and say, hey, listen, you were making all of these calls. I want to understand why you were doing that, because in the rule books, there are these rules, but I want to understand your perspective. And then to accept whatever they say. If they say, I don't know, I was just making it up, then offer, well, could I let you know what those rules actually are? And then you can decide if you want to. I always say that, because if you start fighting over how the rules are being applied in game, you're stopping the game, which is stopping everybody else from enjoying the game, just because of a rules deviation. Is that really what you want to do? It's not like the rules are the be all and the end all. I do think the rules are very important, though, and everyone has to play by the same set of rules. So there must be consistency. Even if the GM is just making all those rules up, they should use the same rule time and time again. So that would be my advice is, yeah. But primarily, if that is the way the GM is going to run, find a different group to play and who appreciate the rules and character builds.
Yeah, it's a conversation. Is this difference reconcilable or not? And if it's not, don't beat your head against the wall. There's different things you could do. You could take over being the GM. If that's an option. Finding a group that's more compatible is another option. But I think if you go into it as an argument to be won, it's already been lost.
Exactly. And did you ever have the experience where you had friends that you really wanted to role play with, and then you did, and they were awful?
Yes, or not even necessarily that too. It's a combination of that, and also just after playing for a while with certain people. No, it is exactly that. No, I digress. I was playing, they were playing, we had not played together, then we started playing together, and we oftentimes will talk about things that had happened from those games because the way that person ran their games and played their games. Right. Sometimes you're just not compatible.
Well, that's it. Absolutely. I mean, I remember in high school when I was playing with my D&D group, we were in a very small town, and our GM was someone who arrived with files worth of planned adventures. Yeah. And they had planned everything out. And at one point they put the file down and they said, I'm not playing with you guys anymore because you don't ever follow the plan. You are trying to rebuild a castle that you cleared the monsters out of. Now you're trying to find a door to fill this hallway, and you're commissioning tapestries. And that's not what I planned for. I'm not playing with you anymore. And you go,
you broke your GM.
Yeah, we did. We're like, but there's only 5 of us who play this game in this entire town. Yeah. What are we going to do? And then we role played with just 4 of us and had a blast, because then we could do it the way we wanted to, So it is tricky, but
I must say too, when I first started playing as well, it was a bit different. The player roles and the GM roles were not quite the way they are now. It was less about building a collaborative story. It was more adversarial in nature.
Right.
Your better GMs were still adversarial, but Like they had their own code of honor that they followed, and these unwritten rules that they would stick to, and made things fair, in their mind. So it was very different. There wasn't a lot of stories being told, and there was not a lot of connected stuff between adventure to adventure, and you were just as likely to start right at the door to the dungeon as you were in the town.
Yeah.
Like,
I remember
there was
that.
no shopping episodes for sure.
No. I mean, didn't Redbox start you outside of that ruined castle? Wasn't that? Because I remember the first thing is you walk up the path towards the ruined castle and there's a ditch or a hole with a cover over it. And if you open it up, there's a carrion crawler inside.
I feel like the first time I even
gazed
at the red box was like 40 years ago. Like I was kind of young, and my older neighbor brought it over, and I feel like I was maybe like kindergarten age, maybe slightly older.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And hadn't played it yet. And matter of fact, the first RPG I would actually play was Gamma World.
Okay.
The first edition Gamma World with a cool cybernetic like riding cat on the cover. And then like I wouldn't play RPGs for a few years after that, and we started playing A Day and Day. So I can, at this point, I cannot tell you what was in that red box.
Yeah, I don't remember much. Just the carrion crawl at the front and a chimney with a silver dagger stuck inside it, and the chimney flew. But that's about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, good times. Good times.
It was definitely good times. So Iraq wants to know: encounter obstacle suggestions for Halloween one-shot. PCs helping friendly vampire cattle ranchers. BBEG is a Minotaur necromancer. So to me, that seems like, you'd want some investigation, some red herrings, like maybe cast some doubt on your vampire cattle rancher. At least I probably would.
Yeah, so and it sounds great. So you've got this Minotaur necromancer who is trying to liberate the herd, I'm assuming, of cattle that the vampires are rustling up.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he wants to usurp control of the vampires.
Oh, I see. I see.
I
was kind of going for.
And also, like, I feel like maybe some tension, like if the PCs are friendly with the vampire cattle ranchers, I feel like maybe some kind of tension between them and the local community, because they're not going to really believe that the vampires are friendly, just cattle ranchers, or at least maybe a segment that isn't, like maybe the Minotaur stirring up some of the townsfolk to kind of get the mob against them.
Yeah. If it's Halloween, I mean, you could have vampires destroying like pumpkin patches to feed the cattle, and the pumpkin patch, the pumpkins send a representative to the PCs to try and stop that from happening. If you want to incorporate sort of jack-o'-lanterns and that kind of thing. I do think it sounds quite interesting, but I don't know. Maybe it's my predisposition, but the moment I heard ranching vampires and minotaurs, I was immediately in the Wild West. I assumed it was two kind of cattle barons fighting it out. One was an actual cattle, and one was the vampires. I don't know. Maybe I've watched too much Westworld or
oh no,
True Grit.
I love it. Like the necromancer only has undead cattle, but undead cattle is useless to vampires because there's no blood to be drained. But clearly, undead cattle make superior beasts of burden because they never get tired.
And that's true.
You can use them forever. So like maybe the Minotaur is stealing the cattle, but he wants to kill them so he can raise them.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do with that. There is a lot that you can do with that. But Halloween specifically, I don't know. I was just assuming pumpkin patches, but I like the idea of the two ranchers fighting it out for the control of the cattle. I kind of feel like the vampires wouldn't be using the cattle to drink from, though. I think that they would be supplying the town with cattle so they could feed on the town. Maybe.
But then why are your players friendly with them? Unless your players aren't particularly nice.
Either they're not nice or they don't know that they're vampires. They just
Well,
assume that they're ranchers.
well, that could be it too.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe they're spiking the cattle. So like when they eat the cattle or use the milk from the cattle, it makes them more like susceptible to charm or passive.
I like that. I do like that. So then that's what I would do is I would have a festival that happens to play out on the 31st of October, where it's this big feast that the ranchers have put on, and it's roast beef and everything that they can possibly think of. And that's where the story kind of starts, perhaps. I don't know.
There's definitely some ways to go with it. Now, when you mentioned the pumpkin patches, that makes me think of an NPC that we made, this gnome necrobotanist, who, and so he didn't start off as a necrobotanist. He started off as a regular botanist, but then his kids destroy his prized roses. So in a fit of rage, like he murders his family, and then afterwards feels regret. So he's always trying to rebuild them out of veggie zombies. So like he's got like these ravens he sends into the world to collect recently departed souls of children, and that he then sticks into these plants that grows veggie zombies. And so they're like these childlike zombies made out of vegetable matter.
That's awesome.
Only in D&D.
It's funny how we use kids a lot. My players encountered a tomb called the Tomb of the Children, and they're coming across these ghosts of kids, and the kids say, do they want to play? And the PCs go, yeah, sure, we want to play. We're going to try and save these kids. So the kids go, okay, cool. You be the knight and we'll be the dragon. And the players are like, wait, what? And so all the kids ghosts get together and become this undead dragon, which then becomes the encounter that the PCs have to fight against. And of course, the kids think it's a game, but they're busy breathing out necrotic fire and
as you do.
And the PCs are like, stop, we don't want to play anymore. And the kids are like, but it's fun. The dragon's going to win. Pounce. It's like, oh dear. Anyway, a lot of fun.
Kids are brutal.
Yeah.
And also kids are just creepy all by themselves.
Exactly.
And that's why you have to use them.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Fry Minis, thanks for the super chat. What do you all love most about Banderhobs? Don't they like store you in an extra dimensional space or something?
Yeah, I'm gonna defer and say Banderhob. The moment you said extra dimensional space, I went, could be. I actually honestly do not know.
I only know that. I know two things about them, right? I think that's a thing because Ted used them in our Dungeons and Delving game. And someone got right? And they got sucked into the stomach. And I know they look like frogs. They look like frog people.
Creepy kid in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Banderhobs.
Yeah, so let's see. There was another question I went to grab, but the chat jumped on me. Sorry.
Oh my goodness.
A victim of the chat. Oh, it jumped quite a bit too.
Well, that's good. Chat should be chatting. That's what it's there for.
Yeah. So Frederick, greetings from South Africa. Did spending time in the specific environment have an influence on constructing your games?
Is that the question?
That is the question.
Can you repeat the question? Spending time on?
In the specific environment in South Africa is what I'm guessing.
Oh. Do I have any influence from that?
Yeah. Greetings from South Africa. Did spending time in a specific environment have an influence on constructing your game?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I didn't hear the did. I didn't hear the did part. Did. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think any environment that you grow up in is going to impact you in one way or another. And I think if you are someone who is very aware of your environment and actively is trying to convert stuff into role playing, that is something that I do. I will see something and I will go, I wonder how that would work in a role playing game, or I wonder how that would work in my next adventure. So I'm constantly kind of adding to my D&D library of random facts and stuff. And definitely growing up in Africa gave me such a different perspective in terms of wildlife, and journeying across country from that sort of perspective. But then living in Japan gave me a whole different perspective. And now that I'm in London, I was in a cathedral literally yesterday, and we were climbing the steps to get to level 2 of this frickin' cathedral, which was, it was 18 flights of steps up.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where we were walking on this little passageway, which was so narrow, my shoulders touched either side. And there's big signs saying, watch your head. It's like, watch every part, because it's so small and so cramped. I'm like, drawing a dungeon with a 10-foot wide corridor is a luxury that would never have happened.
Yes.
All dungeons should be 3 foot wide, and that's it. Swing a sword, go ahead. You're not going to go very far.
Well, yes and no, because here's the thing, right? When I was in Lumley Castle, like the basement actually had really wide corridors that were arched so that they could bring a horse through with a wagon.
Right. Well, that's brilliant, though. You see, that's fantastic. Because now you have an entire heist adventure where the PCs have to hit the wagon as it's going in the passageway, or before it leaves, or whatever. I mean, so yes, I think.
But the contrast, right? Having those contrasts from actually seeing those places.
Correct. And then Finland, the castle, the floors are always uneven, so you can trip. And again, that's just a design for people trying to invade the castle. They will literally trip up over themselves, and then you can stab them in the back. And it's like, that's just insane, and that's wonderful. And and you look at Africa and you go, well, there are no castles in Africa. There is a bastion, which isn't really even a very big bastion. It was built in the 17th century, but there you have some very different things. You have snakes that will stand up and look you in the face if you are a 5 foot, 6 foot tall human being.
No, thank you.
Yeah, definitely no, thank you. But you've got all of the wildlife there.
But what a great idea for a monster, right? Like a snake that stands up out of the grass and looks you directly in the face and then maybe charms you.
Right, absolutely. Well, that would be preferable to what this particular one was. That's the Black Mamba, one of the most deadly snakes. And what a horrid creature it is. I mean, it can stand erect up to about 1.5 meters to 2 meters, depending on how big it is. That's 6 foot high. It will look at you. And unlike a lot of other snakes, which will, if they hear humans, they will avoid humans, and they'll kind of take a circuitous route. The Mamba family, if you are in between it and where it wants to go, it will go through you. So you can try and run away from it, and it will follow you. Anyway, it's an interesting piece of work. And that's why I have my fear of snakes. As everyone says, you should get over that fear. And I went, nope, it's a good fear to have.
Have you ever had a Mamba look you in the eye?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, no, anyway.
No, you personally, have you had a Mamba look you in the eye?
Oh, no, thank God. No, I have not. I have had many other types of snakes. The worst experience I ever had was we were swimming in a river, and the next minute all of the adults came rushing down. We were all kids, and the adults came rushing down shouting, "Get out of the river, get out of the river, get out of the river." And as we're climbing out, we just see the snake, it was 3 meters. So what's that? 12 to 15 feet in length, just casually swimming through the river, right through where we had been moments before. Didn't care. And if it had bitten any one of us, we would have been dead, because again, it's one of these things. We were in the middle of nowhere on the coast. So medical help was not an option. But yeah, no, truly scary things. So
I like New Jersey. There's very little things here that kill you. we don't get any extreme weather phenomena. It's not on fire most of the time.
Right.
It gets trashed for a lot of things, but like hurricanes, tornadoes, not really happening. No earthquakes. It's not ablaze. Right. There's a couple spiders, but there's not too many of them, and they are kind of little.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've got bears, but they're up in North Jersey, and they're the little ones anyway. They're just the black bears.
Okay.
We were
nice
on a
and
job.
Quiet and calm.
We were on a job, and my guys were like doing their thing, and then they're watching this guy walking by, and he's like on his phone doing something. He's not paying attention, and there was like a bear like right there. So, but also they're kind of more timid too. Like as long as you're not between them and their cubs or something.
Yeah. What does a black bear stand? 4 foot at the shoulder, 3 foot at the shoulder?
It's something like that. It's one of the smaller ones. It's not like a grizzly or a brown bear.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't want to wrestle it, but still.
No.
So Naya, the player who's very rules oriented, but I'm very storytelling oriented and don't really like the nitty gritty rules as much. How do I balance our styles?
I'm going to let you answer that one.
So I would start by just asking them what they want out of the game, right? Like, what are you looking for? What are the things that you like? And, if they're reasonable, you maybe can find a compromise where occasionally you give them a chance to use that thing that they really like doing, diving into the rules, but you don't do it all the time, right? And you can just tell them, like, I'll try and work some stuff in, but like, that's not my main thing. And then, everything, like, there's so many things. It's just like having a discussion between hopefully friends, but more importantly, adults, and, coming to an understanding that, everyone can be agreeable on.
Yeah. And making sure that you are not the one at the table who is imposing your will. Because sometimes we forget that. And you go, oh, that player is so rules orientated. But everyone else at the table might go, yeah, but our GM is too story focused. So then you realize, hang on a moment, I am the one who may be out of alignment with the rest of the group. So I always also suggest talk to that player, but talk to everybody else as well and ask them their opinion. What do they think about having more mechanics, more rules, playing more like so-and-so or less, and just sort of gauge it. So you can realize, you might find that if you've got a group of 6 people, you might find that 2 people want more rules, and then they can find a group and play with that group and have a much improved experience, and you can get in some new people and have a better game as well.
Session 0, like this is the kind of stuff you want to talk about in Session 0. Is like, what are people looking to get out of the game? And I think it's just really good for the health of of the group overall, and for everyone to kind of get the enjoyment they want out of it. And really, if you're playing in a game that you're not satisfied with, like, this hobby takes up a lot of time. Too much time really to be wasting that much time on a game that is meh to you, right? Like,
exactly.
And we're in this age of RPGs where, maybe you can't find something in person, but I'm sure you could find it, online, or you might just have to build the thing that you want. So. Fry minis. This one I have no way of answering, but you might have some insights. Guy, I absolutely love World Anvil, but I always end up spending way too much time writing stuff. How do I build a time pausing machine to best utilize World Anvil?
I am afraid that the secrets to building the time machine are very secret, and so secret, as a matter of fact, even I don't know them. I wish there was a way to have more time. World Anvil is a great software for creating worlds and things in. My one piece of advice is create what you need for the game. Don't create further than that, and make sure that the game is driving your creation and not the other way around. because if you are creating and creating and creating and creating and creating your game, yes, you might have this amazing stuff that you've built around it, but your game is actually going to suffer because either you're trying to force all of that stuff into the game and force that into your players' heads, and they really won't give it as much love as you will. Whereas if you're doing it the other way around and players say, oh, what's on the other side of those mountains? And during the game, you say, that is the Cretanese Empire, which is full of snake people. Don't go there. As an NPC, you would be saying that, obviously. And they go, okay, cool. Well, we're going to start heading there. Make sure your session finishes before they arrive. Then write the Cretanese Empire and the snake people. And then figure out the trade or the lack of trade or all that kind of stuff. So I would always say expand out. Don't start out and then try and push it all into your game. It'll allow you to have a better balance, I think, anyway. But if you really enjoy world building, do that. Because, yeah.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely no matter how you're doing your games, whether it's World Anvil, something else, or just in your pen and paper, right? That is the best advice. And I think the very first place that I read that advice was there was a world building campaign guide for AD&D back in the day. And it was just like the big globe with a wizard standing, like leering over top of it. And I think there was like one section in there that talked about starting small and working your way out, right? Like if your adventurers are going to start in this particular village or hamlet, just do that, right? And maybe a couple of outlying areas and not even really flushing them out because it's a trap, right? Like you mentioned, you're going to work on things that they're not going to use. You're going to want them to use it. And also, if you wait to kind of like develop it as you need it, it gives you an opportunity to reflect what your players want out of the game into your campaign. Like they might start talking about, towards the end of the session, about, hey, this is what I want to do when we get to this place, or what I want to know about this kingdom with snake people in it, right? And then maybe it was something you weren't going to put in there, but now you can look at it through the player's lens and go, okay, is that a thing? What is their expectation going to be met with when they get there? And you can either, you pull on that or shut it down, whatever you think you need to do. But I feel like anytime you can redirect your players' ideas back into the game, you're just going to get more buy-in from them.
That's it. Absolutely. Do you feel that that's something that has changed? Because I remember there was the Castle Guide for second edition AD&D. That was the Blue Book, which was how to build castles and run castles and things. There was the Equipment Guide. Do you feel that's kind of been lost in the current phase? We're not getting books that help us to tell kind of more, I don't want to say accurate stories, or to get people to think outside of the pre-made stuff anymore.
So a game like 5e does not support that stuff that much, because those things were made to be more granular. So it's weird. Like AD&D was very broad when it started, and then they started increasing the granularity via splat books, lots and lots of them, to explore it. And back then D&D was still new. RPGs were kind of new, and things would come up and be like, well, what if someone wants to do this? And then so they're writing a book for that. And I feel like we've kind of gone through that. Like, oh, we want to build a castle, or like incorporated in the rules where like you attract followers. So like, I don't know that it was originally thought about from the designer's aspect of going like, well, what does that mean? But once we started playing, we started asking those questions. What does that mean? What am I going to do with these followers? I just had 100 soldiers show up, right. Or I have an apprentice now. And, and so they started doing that, and I think more from like a mechanical aspect.
Sure.
Where the hobby has moved way more towards a narrative driven aspect than a mechanical one. So a lot of the things that they come out seem to kind of support that, and the mechanics are more broad strokes.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, that castle guide, I remember we used to sit there and go, well, it's 10 foot of wall that's 3 segments thick because it's on the ground floor and it's on a swamp and it's this portage fee and this multiplier. And you'd have this mathematical equation to work out 10 feet of stone wall.
Yeah.
And the book never presented, here is the big equation. It was always, no, here's one piece, here's another piece, here's another. So definitely a lot crunchier in those days.
So, yeah, and also, like, I honestly, the longer that I play these games and the more I'm into the hobby, I just don't enjoy, like, rules heavy, crunchy mechanics, as much either. Like, I don't want someone to be like, here, read this 400-page book and then we'll have fun. I'm like, that doesn't really sound like fun to me.
Yeah.
So I 5e is about as rules heavy as I want to get.
Yeah.
If someone's like, hey, do you want to play this game? I probably will if I want to play with the people. But it wouldn't be because of the system.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Even though, yeah, I mean, it depends. And some people just love that stuff. They want to play more of a simulationist type game. Mm. But I feel like I get enough reality in reality.
Yes. Oh, my goodness.
So there's quite a few more questions that we're not going to get to today. The hour mark, we've just passed it. And I don't want to hold Guy up. I know you're very busy. And I want to respect that, but jump down to the description where you can find those links and click away and follow Guy across the interwebs and stalk him in a good way, not the creepy way. Final thoughts before we head on out?
Final thoughts, I think just have fun playing your games and make sure that you are playing them to have fun and not because you have to or feel indebted to or because you think that's what makes you cool. Play your game because you're having fun. If you're not having fun, play a different game with different people until eventually you have fun. Or try accountancy. I mean,
Find your fun. That's great advice. And until next time, stay nerdy.